All right, let's dive in today. We're going to be talking about Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell and see who we can learn from it. See if it lives up to all the hype. We're really focusing on like how entrepreneurs can kind of get out of that 24/7 hustle and actually enjoy life again.
Yeah, it's really interesting how Martell's own story, from juvenile detention to entrepreneurial success, really kind of frames his entire philosophy. Like he realizes that even when you make it, the cost can be huge if you're sacrificing your well-being in the process.
It's a wild backstory. He finds this like sense of order in programming while he's in juvie. Like I love how he talks about like how code always gives predictable results. It's totally unlike the chaos that he was used to.
Yeah.
So I can see how that kind of planted a seed for this whole approach to business.
Absolutely. That need for systems, that
Yeah.
need for predictability, it's like woven through the entire book. He took this energy that could have gone in a very destructive direction and channeled it into building companies and.
But then even after like reaching that entrepreneurial mountaintop, he has this like big aha moment.
Mm.
And a painful breakup forces him to confront the fact that all this business success, came at the cost of his personal life.
Right.
And it wasn't enough to just have systems for work. It's like he needed them for his whole life.
Right. And that's where the crux of this buyback principle comes in. It's this idea that you, as the entrepreneur, have to be ruthless about focusing on what your unique talents are. Like, not trying to be a jack of all trades, but mastering your genius zone.
Right. It's so easy to fall into that trap of, oh, I could do it all myself. I'm definitely guilty of that. But he argues that this is exactly what leads us to hit what he calls the pain line.
Mm.
Did that concept resonate with you?
Absolutely. The pain line is that breaking point where something has to give. Like your health, your relationships, maybe even your ethics. It's the price we pay for trying to do everything ourselves. And Martell isn't saying work less, he's saying work smarter.
Okay, so we're not aiming for like a 4-hour work week here. It's about strategic effort. He even says that systems are more important than goals, which I found really interesting. It's like shifting from the destination to the way of traveling.
Right. It's about sustainable change, and he calls it this buyback loop. So you audit your time, ditch those low-value tasks, and then fill the space with the high-value activities. And he has this tool, the DIRAP matrix, to help you kind of figure that out, what to ditch and what to keep.
Ooh, I love a good visual framework.
Yeah.
Break down the D-Ride matrix for us. What is it all about?
So the DRAP matrix basically categorizes your tasks based on two things. Do they make you money and do they give you energy? So there's four quadrants. The first one is delegation. So these are low money tasks that drain your energy. Things like admin tasks, scheduling, things that like an assistant could totally handle.
Oh man, my inbox is like that entire quadrant.
Right. And then there's replacement, and this is where it gets kind of tricky, right? Because these are tasks that do make you money, but they're still energy sucks. A lot of entrepreneurs get stuck here hiring to grow the business, not to buy back their own time.
So they end up being the highest paid person doing the most draining work.
Hmm.
Makes sense why that deals to burnout.
Exactly. He even tells this story about almost missing a partnership with a thought leader because he was so bogged down in data migration. And he realized he could have outsourced that for way less than his time was worth.
Total light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so delegation and replacement are all about minimizing or outsourcing. What about the other two quadrants?
So you have investment, which is all about the future, right? These are activities that might not be profitable now, but fuel your growth and light you up. Things like networking, learning new skills, even hobbies that could spark ideas.
Like strategic deposits into your future self.
Exactly. And then there's the holy grail, the production quadrant.
Yes.
That's where you want to spend the majority of your time. These are the tasks that both make you money and energize you. This is where he brings in Oprah as an example, someone who has mastered this.
Oprah. Oh, tell me more about that. How does she structure her day?
So it's pretty eye-opening. He breaks down her schedule, and she only spends about 2 hours a day on, like, traditional business stuff.
2 hours. What in the world does she do with the rest of her time?
She prioritizes the things that nourish her. Things like meditation, exercise, connecting with loved ones, reading. Oprah recognizes that her true genius is connecting with her audience and staying open to new ideas.
So it's not about just working less, it's about working on the right things. But how do you actually escape that, like, energy draining replacement quadrant?
Well, he has another tool for this, the replacement ladder. It's this 5-step system for systematically climbing to freedom by hiring and delegating strategically.
Okay, I'm ready to climb. What's the first rung on this ladder?
Yeah, so it starts with hiring an administrative assistant, which frees you from this feeling of being stuck, bogged down by admin tasks, constantly reacting to emails and scheduling demands.
The unsung heroes of the business world. Taking ownership of your inbox and your calendar, those are huge time sucks. But that's just step one, right?
Right. And as you climb the ladder, you continue to delegate strategically, moving towards this state of flow where you're really in your genius zone. But even with a great team, there are always those like little time wasters that kind of creep in.
Ugh, yes. It's like there are these time assassins lurking in the shadows, ready to steal your focus.
He calls them out. He identifies 5 of them: the staller, the speed demon, the supervisor, the saver, and the self-medicator.
Ooh, I'm already feeling personally attacked. Let's unmask these villains one by one. Who is the staller?
The scholar is the one who hesitates on big decisions, lets fear and uncertainty kind of take over. This is the part of us that procrastinates on those important but potentially scary moves.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. What about the speed demon?
That's the one who makes rash decisions without thinking things through. Leads to costly mistakes down the road.
Okay, that's me too. This is getting a little too real.
Right. The supervisor micromanages everything and everyone, can't let go of control. The saver hoards resources instead of investing in growth.
And lastly, we have the self-medicator.
Yes, that's the part of us that escapes the stress and chaos through unhealthy habits.
Wow, we've got a whole rogues gallery of time assassins here.
Yeah. The key takeaway here is that recognizing these patterns is the first step to reclaiming your time and energy. We got to be honest with ourselves about which ones are holding us back.
This feels like a good point to take a pause and reflect. When we come back, we'll dive into Martell's strategies for actually combating these time assassins and putting systems in place to really take back control of our schedules. See you in part 2. All right, welcome back. We left off talking about those pesky time assassins that sabotage our productivity. So how do we actually, fight back against these villains and reclaim our schedules?
He suggests going for those quick wins first. Remember that DRP matrix we were talking about? A lot of entrepreneurs are drowning in that delegation quadrant, doing all those tasks that could easily be handled by someone else.
That makes sense. Start by getting those low-hanging fruit off your plate. What kind of tasks are we talking about?
Like scheduling, booking travel, managing expenses, things that don't require your unique expertise but eat up hours of your time. He gives this great example of Miranda. I think she was a COO and was completely burning herself out.
I feel that. It's easy to think you're being productive when you're working late, tackling everything yourself, but it's so often counterproductive.
Exactly. And when she did a time and energy audit, she saw just how much time she was wasting on things an assistant could easily handle. And by delegating those tasks, she was finally able to focus on that strategic work, the stuff that actually moved the company forward.
Right. It's a good reminder that sometimes the biggest gains come from letting go. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we struggle with delegation. We worry about losing control or things not being done, right.
That's where his concept of playbooks comes in. Think of them as step-by-step guides for any task that you want to delegate.
So really detailed standard operating procedures, but for every aspect of your business.
More than that, they really capture the nuances of how you do things, including your decision-making frameworks, potential roadblocks, even your best practices. You're not just telling someone what to do, you're giving them the knowledge to do it well.
That's a game changer. And he even argues that these playbooks can be more valuable than a company's intellectual property. He makes this comparison to Ray Kroc at McDonald's.
Right. Kroc didn't invent the hamburger, but he saw the power of their system, their playbook, and he used it to build a global empire. It's about creating that repeatable, scalable process.
So it's not just about having a great product or service. It's about having a system that can replicate success. Okay, I'm sold on playbooks. How do you actually go about creating them? Because it sounds kind of daunting.
So he has this really clever method called the camcorder method, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You actually record yourself performing the task that you want to delegate.
Wait, you're telling me I just hit record and talk through my process?
Yep. You explain your thought process, you point out potential pitfalls, basically create a video tutorial. It forces you to slow down and really think through each step, which can often reveal inefficiencies even in your own workflow. Plus, it makes it super easy to delegate because you have this clear visual guide that you can share.
That's brilliant. I'm definitely trying that one. Okay, so we've tackled the delegation quadrant with playbooks, but what about the replacement quadrant? Those tasks that make you money but drain your energy. Those feel harder to let go of.
Well, he argues that even those tasks can be systematically delegated using the replacement ladder we talked about earlier. It's about gradually replacing yourself in every area of your business.
He uses Andy Warhol as an example of someone who really mastered this, which at first glance seems counterintuitive because, like, he's the ultimate solo artist.
Exactly. But Warhol was a master of building systems. He had his famous factory where he delegated tasks to this team of assistants, which allowed him to, like, scale his creative output massively.
So it's not about being like a lone genius. It's about building a system that allows you to focus on your zone of
I
genius.
love that reframing. It challenges this romantic notion of, like, the struggling artist or the entrepreneur. Martell argues that true success often lies in, like, collaboration and delegation. Now, even with systems and playbooks in place, things aren't always going to go perfectly right. That's where that feedback piece comes in.
Ugh, the dreaded F word. I think most people cringe at the thought of giving or receiving feedback. It can be so awkward and uncomfortable.
It's true, but he makes a really compelling case for why feedback is so crucial for building a strong team and a strong culture. He even shares this pretty embarrassing story about a time he avoided giving feedback, and it backfired spectacularly.
Oh, I remember that story. He had this contractor who wasn't performing well, but instead of addressing it directly, he just kind of let it fester.
And it blew up in his face during this company-wide call. He accidentally called out the contractor's lack of participation, not realizing he was actually on the call.
Oof, cringeworthy moment. But it highlights the importance of being direct and timely with feedback. Like, sweeping things under the rug just makes things worse in the long run.
Right. And his point is that feedback isn't about being critical or judgmental. It's about creating this open and honest dialogue. And he emphasizes that it's a two-way street. Like, we need to be able to both give and receive feedback effectively.
And he introduces that clear framework to help with that, right? I'm curious, what does that entail?
Yeah. It stands for context, example, ask, listen, reject, or accept. So first, you provide context for the feedback. Setting the stage, giving the person some background information.
So you're not just, like, dropping a bomb out of nowhere. You're giving the person a frame of reference.
Exactly. Then you provide a specific example of the behavior you're addressing. This is about being really concrete, avoiding vague generalizations.
Okay. So you're grounding the feedback in reality. What about the ask part?
That's where you invite the other person's perspective. You're not just lecturing them, you're actually seeking to understand their side of the story.
It's about making it a conversation, not a monologue. And listen is pretty self-explanatory, right?
Right, but active listening is so crucial here. You're showing respect, you're creating space for the other person to feel heard, and then finally, reject or accept. This is about giving the person agency. They have the power to decide whether or not to take your feedback on board.
You're empowering them to make their own choices,
Yeah.
not dictating what they should do. And he argues that this approach creates a much more like collaborative and supportive environment.
Exactly. He even talks about a time when he received tough feedback from a mentor that really helped him grow as a leader. And he emphasizes that feedback, even when it's difficult to hear, is ultimately a gift.
Yeah, it's a muscle we all need to develop, both for giving and receiving.
Huh.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. From identifying those time-wasting tasks and delegating effectively to creating playbooks and mastering the art of feedback. I feel like we've learned a lot about how to reclaim our time and energy.
But as Martell points out, it's not enough just to create space in your schedule. You have to be really intentional about how you fill that newfound freedom. And that's where his concept of the preloaded year comes in.
Ooh, I'm really intrigued by this idea. Let's dive into that preloaded year and explore how we can actually, invest our time wisely to create a truly fulfilling life. We'll be back with that after a quick break. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into Buy Back Your Time. We've been exploring Dan Martell's strategies for entrepreneurs to escape that 24/7 grind, but now comes the fun part, what do we actually do with all this time we've reclaimed?
That's where his vision goes beyond just, business. He talks about the preloaded year, which is all about proactively designing your ideal year, making sure that both your personal and your professional goals are getting the attention they deserve.
I have to admit, planning a whole year in advance feels a little overwhelming to me. Where do you even start with that?
Well, he says to start with your big rocks, the non-negotiables. So the events and activities that absolutely cannot be missed. Think vacations, family milestones, conferences, maybe product launches, those things that really, truly matter to you.
So it's like blocking out those big chunks of time first before the day-to-day stuff just starts to like fill up your calendar. Otherwise, those important things just end up getting squeezed out.
Exactly. He even shares this story about forgetting his own father's birthday because he was so caught up in work.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, it's a cautionary tale for all of us who, get hyper-focused on our businesses.
Right. It's a painful reminder that work-life balance is like an ongoing battle. So the preloaded year is kind of like a safeguard against that, making sure that we prioritize those personal big rocks too.
Right. It's about creating a framework that ensures that you're making time for what truly matters, both personally and professionally. And then once those big rocks are in place, then you can start filling in those gaps with those smaller tasks, those smaller activities. He even suggests batching similar tasks together to make things more efficient.
Oh, I love efficiency. So like no more context switching every 5 minutes. But what about those of us who are, shall we say, allergic to planning? Like things change, opportunities come up. Doesn't this approach feel a little too rigid?
Yeah, I get that. But he emphasizes that the preloaded year isn't about being inflexible. It's more like a roadmap that can be adjusted as needed. Life throws curveballs, and we need to be able to adapt.
So it's not about setting everything in stone. It's about having a plan that gives you that structure, but also allows for that flexibility. Okay, that makes sense.
Think of it as a living document, something that you revisit regularly to make sure that it still aligns with your goals, your priorities. The key is to be proactive rather than reactive with your time.
Okay, that takes the pressure off a bit.
Huh.
But it still leaves us with the question of like, what do we actually do with all this time that we've bought back?
Mm.
I mean, leisure time is great, but it's not like we're all retiring to the beach, right?
Well, he addresses that directly. He introduces what he calls the 7 pillars of a holistic life. This is a framework for making sure that you're investing your time wisely across all the areas that contribute to a fulfilling life.
Okay, I'm ready to build a well-rounded life. What are these pillars?
Okay, so they are health, wealth, love, friends and family, mission, adventure, and legacy.
It's interesting how he goes beyond just that typical like work-life balance idea.
Yeah.
This is more about like nurturing every aspect of your being.
Exactly. And he suggests that you regularly assess how you're doing in each of these areas and identify any that might be getting neglected.
It's like a personal inventory for your well-being.
Right. He even suggests giving yourself a score for each pillar and then focusing on improving your lowest scores. Just a really simple way to make sure you're not letting any area of your life fall by the wayside.
This reminds me of something that he said earlier about how entrepreneurs are often like addicted to chaos.
Hmm.
We thrive on that adrenaline rush of constantly solving problems and putting out fires. But this framework reminds us that true fulfillment, it comes from creating a more sustainable kind of like joy and well-being.
Mm-hmm. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're challenged and nurtured. It's about channeling your energy into those activities that align with your values and bring you a sense of purpose.
Well, this deep dive into Buy Back Your Time has been incredibly insightful. We've gone from identifying our time assassins and delegating effectively to creating playbooks, designing our perfect week, and now investing in our 7 pillars for a holistic life. It's a powerful reminder that we all have the power to reclaim our time and create a life that's both successful and fulfilling.
Absolutely. And now that you have this framework for reclaiming your time, what will you do with it? How can you leverage this newfound freedom to make a real difference in your business, in your relationships, and in your life?
That's a great question to ponder. And for those of you who want to explore these ideas further, we've included links to Dan Martell's book and other helpful resources on our website. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep buying back your time.